what is a hypothesis test? So we're just jumping into hypothesis testing. So let's just get an idea of what are we even doing? Um, so here's kind of the key. We just finished confidence intervals. The whole point of a confidence interval is we're using a sample to create an interval to pin down some sort of parameter from the population. So we're using an interval to try and pin down that we think the population average is in some sort of interval, or the population proportion is in some sort of interval. In a hypothesis test, what we're going to do instead is we're going to test a claim on the population. So a little bit different. Instead of trying to pin down what the population, say, average is, there's going to be a claim on what the population average is. So someone in a confidence interval will be like, hey, I want to know the average amount of money kids spend on lunch, right? So a confidence interval would produce an interval to try and pin that down. A hypothesis test, someone might claim, say, for our high school that I believe on average kids spend $2.75 on lunch. That is a claim on the population. What we're going to do is we're going to test that claim. So someone's going to be like, I believe the population average is this, and we're going to try and test that belief. And we can argue, well, I think it's actually higher, I think it's lower, or I just don't think it is what you claim. So we're testing a claim on the population. Another way of thinking of it is there's going to be a claim on the population. So maybe I claim kids on average spend $2.75 on lunch. And we're going to collect a sample. We're going to check if the sample is consistent with the population assumption. So if I claim kids on average spend $2.75 on lunch, I go and get a random sample and I find the average is $7.25. That sample I just got is nowhere consistent with the population. And obviously there's a lot more stats that's going to go on there and math that's going to kind of check and make sure they are. But we're going to check if our sample is at all consistent with the population. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of what a hypothesis test is. So let's expand on it a little bit more. So shooting free throws is an excellent example on trying to draw this out. Let's claim I'm a basketball player, and we're going to go to the gym and shoot free throws. You know, go to the line, shoot buckets. I claim that in my career, the proportion of free throws I can make is, we'll say 80%, 0.8. That is the claim on the population. I claim I'm an 80% free throw shooter. So what we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to collect a sample and see, is that sample essentially consistent with my claim on the population? So you could argue, Mr. Hall, I think you're higher than 80%, I think you're lower, or I just don't think you're an 80% free throw shooter. So we would go down to the gym. We'd probably have a set of rules like, yes, I do have to stand at the free throw line. I'm going to use a regulation basketball. It's going to be a regulation hoop. We're going to make sure everything's, fair and right. And let's say I shoot 50 free throws, okay? And when I shoot those 50 free throws, I make 32 out of 50 32 out of 50 free throws, which that is a proportion of 0.64. This would essentially be our p hat. So what a hypothesis testing would look like with this is, yes, I'm claiming I'm an 80% free throw shooter, but I just made 64%. Okay, so we're seeing, is this sample really consistent with the population? So what you would end up having to do is be like, all right, I claim I'm 80%, I just shot 64, so do we think this is true? I'm really an 80% free throw shooter and I just had a bad day? Or, you know what, maybe this isn't true and I'm not really an 80% free throw shooter. That's essentially what we're going to be doing in hypothesis testing. There's going to be a lot more structure to this to make sure different pieces work and everything works out in a statistically correct manner. But that's the gist of it. You're going to have a claim on the population. We're going to go get a sample. And then we're basically going to compare the two and be like, all right, well, I just shot 64%. You claimed 80%. Are those different enough for you? Being off 16%, did I just have a bad day? Or maybe I'm not an 80% free throw shooter. That's the gist of hypothesis testing. So we'll get into a further detail on how you can do this in a much more statistical manner, but that is the groundwork of what we are doing in this unit. And that is what a hypothesis test is.